Feels like every offseason, there's at least one trade that makes you double check your phone to make sure it's not a fake Adam Schefter account. Since 2020, the NFL's been throwing around big names like it's fantasy football, franchise quarterbacks, star receivers, even future Hall of Famers getting shipped off like they're nothing. Some of these trades look genius at the time, others age like milk. So today, we're going back and revisiting some of the biggest trades since 2020. Who got robbed, who came out on top, and which GMs probably wish there was an undo button. Spoiler alert, some of these are a lot wilder than we gave them credit for. Now, I'm not going to ask you guys to subscribe to my channel or anything like that. The plan is for me to earn your subscription before we go any further. So let's hope I do that, and let's continue on with the video. Now, let's start with one of the bigger ones, the Browns and the Seahawks trade. Now, when this trade went down, I really thought it was going to be one of those rare win-win deals. The Broncos got their franchise quarterback to put it all together to make a run back to the playoffs. The Seahawks, they're going to offload an aging vet and stockpile picks to build for their future. On paper, this sounds like a pretty good deal. Some might say the Broncos could have even won this trade at the time. Not now, of course. Let's talk about Denver first, and they get an easy F from B, and it's not even up for debate. Before Russell Wilson even took a snap, they handed him a $245 million extension, and that contract aged like milk. His first year under Nathaniel Hackett was a complete disaster. He looked lost, the offense was dead last in scoring, and Hackett got fired before the season even ended. It was so bad that people were clowning the Broncos every week on national television. That's how bad it got. 2023 came around, new head coach Sean Payton was supposed to be the fixer, and yeah, Russell Wilson played better, he threw more touchdowns and looked more in control, but it still wasn't good enough. He wasn't the same guy, he didn't elevate the offense, he couldn't carry them, and the team ended up benching him late in the season, partially over contract disputes, and partially because the trust is gone. Ended up using that 4th rounder on an edge rusher. He hasn't really done much at this point. His name is really hard to pronounce, so I'm not even going to try to botch it. With the Seahawks, they won this trade in every possible way, and we're not even going to go into Drew Lock, Noah Fant, and Shelby Harris because they're not even the big parts of why they won this trade. They drafted Charles Cross, who was one of the best left tackles in the league in 2024. Then they drafted Devon Witherspoon, who was one of the best corners in the league in his rookie year and still is right now. And then they got 2 solid pass rushers in Boya Mafe and Derek Hall. If I was grading this solely off Devon Witherspoon, this would definitely get an A+, but now that I'm including Charles Cross in this, it's an A+ regardless. I mean, you have your cornerstone for your offensive line and the cornerstone for your defense possibly. Then we still don't know Boya Mafe and Derek Hall could be, so like I said, the sky's still the limit with this trade, but like I said before, I'm still giving it an A+. Seahawks turned an aging quarterback into multiple starters and young stars. The Broncos, they're kind of recovering now, but they still took a massive hit from this trade. Let's talk about another trade, the Tyreek Hill deal between the Chiefs and the Miami Dolphins. Back in March of 2022, this one came out of nowhere. The Chiefs were fresh off another deep playoff run. Mahomes was still doing Mahomes things, and Tyreek Hill was still one of the most dangerous weapons in the NFL. So when the report is dropped that Hill was being shopped and then traded to the Miami Dolphins for 5 draft picks, it felt surreal. The Miami Dolphins sent over a 2022 first round pick, a 2nd rounder, and 2 fourths, and a 6th rounder, and then they immediately gave Hill a 4-year, $120 million extension, making him the highest paid wide receiver in league history, at the time of course. Let's talk about the Miami side first. Tyreek Hill immediately delivered. In 2022, he put up over 1,710 yards and had another elite season in 2023, and he even won Offensive Player of the Year in that same year. Now, he did regress in 2024, mainly due to injuries, and he has pretty much said that he's been frustrated with the Miami Dolphins, specifically the quarterback problems, and he has been in trade rumors, but it looks like he will be staying with the Miami Dolphins going into 2025. Now, here's the crazy part. The Chiefs didn't fall off at all, and you would think with trading one of the best receivers in the NFL, you're going to regress a little bit. And no, the Chiefs, they didn't. Instead, they won 2 more Super Bowls, Mahomes adjusted, Andy Reid evolved the offense, and most importantly, Kansas City used these picks from this trade to build on both sides of the ball. With that 2022 first rounder, they took Trent McDuffie, and now he's one of the best corners in the league. Now that 2nd rounder went towards Sky Moore, who has been a big disappointment. And then one of their picks in 2023, they used on Rashee Rice, who had a really good rookie year, but unfortunately in his second season, he did miss most of the year after suffering that season-ending knee injury. For the Dolphins, I'm giving this trade a B+, and the only reason I'm not giving it an A is because they haven't exactly won anything with Tyreek Hill on their roster quite yet, and mainly that is due to quarterback issues, unfortunately. I'm going to give the Chiefs an A-, and the only reason I don't give them an A+ is because they still haven't replaced Tyreek Hill's production quite yet. We don't know what Xavier Worthy could be, and we don't know what Rashee Rice could be, so that's still up in the air. This gets an A- though, because they did get Trent McDuffie, and they did win 2 rings after that, so that's a big emphasis on this grade still. But anytime you can lose your receiver, your star receiver at that, and still win 2 rings and come away with good talent, that's still a win-win. We now move to the Davante Adams trade between the Green Bay Packers and the Las Vegas Raiders. This one was a shocker to many because Davante Adams was still one of the best receivers in football, and he had just came off one of the best seasons of his career, and it seemed like he was destined to be a Green Bay Packer. However, contract issues and long-term uncertainty with Aaron Rodgers led to tension. Adams said he wasn't playing on the franchise tag though, and he wanted out, and the Raiders were eager to make a splash and reunite Adams with his college quarterback, Derek Carr. So the Packers would trade Davante Adams to the Raiders for a first and second round pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. Then Vegas gave him a 5-year, $140 million extension, making him the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL at the time. And Adams did what he was always known to be doing. He was being elite. He put up 1,516 yards and 14 touchdowns. So like I said, he didn't miss a beat. However, the problem wasn't Davante Adams in Vegas though, it was everything else. The Raiders outside of him were a mess. The defense was inconsistent, the offensive line was shaky, and Josh McDaniels, well, it was Josh McDaniels, a really bad head coach. Carr also gets benched, and then in 2023, Carr gets released, and then Jimmy Garoppolo comes in, and things somehow get worse. Garoppolo was absolutely atrocious. Aiden O'Connell came in, and Adams was visibly frustrated, and his numbers dipped. And suddenly, the best receiver in football was stuck in a full-on rebuild with no consistent quarterback play, a coaching carousel around him, and in 2024, he played just 3 games with the Raiders before being traded to the Jets. And things didn't get better there either, obviously, for Adams. The Packers, they used those picks pretty wisely. They turned it into a first-round linebacker, Quay Walker, who's been solid, not a star, a fast, athletic piece on their defense. The second rounder became Christian Watson, who flashed with his big playability in his rookie year with Aaron Rodgers, and later became one of Jordan Love's top targets. Now there have been some injury concerns, but the upside is still there. The bigger story though is that Green Bay was able to transition to a younger, cheaper offense without Adams and without Rodgers and still stay competitive. They developed Jordan Love, who got a production from wide receivers like Watson, Jaden Reed, and Romeo Doubs, and they made a playoff push in 2023. Now that's a big win in the long run. How does this grade out for me personally? For the Raiders, you paid premium picks and paid top dollar for a guy who gave you one elite season, but no wins, no playoff success, and now you're kind of still stuck in quarterback limbo. Now you have Geno Smith, but we all know he's not a long-term solution for this team. So I would give this a C+. Adams produced, but he didn't elevate this franchise, and they're still chasing stability. For the Packers, I'll give them a B-. They lost the best receiver in the league, and they still managed to develop a young quarterback and surround with promising talent. Even if Quay Walker and Watson aren't superstars, they helped retool this team. So, B- for me, solid return, and they handled the rebuild better than expected. Now let's look at one of the most controversial trades in recent history, the Deshaun Watson trade between the Texans and the Cleveland Browns. At the time of this trade, Deshaun Watson was in the middle of over 20 civil lawsuits alleging sexual misconduct. He just sat out the entire 2021 season, and nobody even knew if he was going to be eligible to play. The Cleveland Browns probably knew this, and they still gave up a monster haul for him. 3 first-round draft picks, a third-rounder, and 2 fourth-rounders. On top of that, they signed him to a 5-year, fully guaranteed $230 million extension, one of the richest guaranteed deals in NFL history at the time. And honestly, let's keep this short. Watson was suspended 11 games in 2022, and when he took the field, he looked rusty, he looked slow, indecisive. He didn't look anything like Deshaun Watson from 2020. 2023, things didn't get better. He had a couple of solid moments, but he was still inconsistent, and then he suffered a season-ending injury that left Cleveland turning to backups like PJ Walker and Joe Flacco. And ironically, Joe Flacco signed off the couch and led the Browns to the playoffs. Joe Flacco, a $38 million journeyman with zero expectations, led him to the playoffs, not Deshaun Watson. It somehow got worse in 2024. Watson plays pretty badly, then he suffers an Achilles injury, putting him out for the rest of the season, and he's also expected to be out for 2025. Then the Texans, everybody thought they would have come out of this trade looking like a mess. Nobody really knew how they would come out of this trade looking, but they ended up coming out of this trade looking like absolute geniuses. That trade helped them take Will Anderson, who was Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2023. Tank Dell, who was decent before getting hurt. Kamari Lester, who is already one of the better young corners in the NFL right now. And if you include CJ Stroud, who the Texans got by tearing down their team, that's also a win-win. By 2023, the Texans had gone from one of the worst teams in the NFL to a playoff team with a young core that looks like it's built to last. Will Anderson is a defensive menace, Stroud looks like a superstar, and suddenly, Houston has a head coach, DeMeco Ryans, and the future looks brighter than ever. So let's call this trade what it is. The Browns, they get an easy F here. Self-explanatory. Deshaun Watson has gave them nothing in return, and now he's taking half of their money. So self-explanatory here. The Browns, they get an easy F from me. And Deshaun Watson has taken half of their money, and he's done nothing in return at all to make that trade worth it. The Texans, they took a toxic situation and flipped it into a high-end draft capital and built a new identity around it. Young stars, a franchise quarterback, defensive anchor, and playoff wins. Easy A+ here. Next is the Christian McCaffrey trade between the Carolina Panthers and the San Francisco 49ers. This one went down in October of 2022, right before the NFL trade deadline. At the time, the Panthers were spiraling. They had just fired Matt Rule, and Baker Mayfield was spiraling as well. He didn't look good. This team knew they were rebuilding, so they made the call to move their best player in Christian McCaffrey. The Niners, they sent over a second, third, and fourth round pick in 2023 and 2024. Christian McCaffrey, he looked absolutely electric. His debut came 2 days later, but within a week he was already throwing, rushing, catching touchdowns in the same game. And what Kyle Shanahan built for him wasn't just a standard run-heavy attack, it was a positionless, motion-based weapon factory, and McCaffrey was the engine. He gave them elite running, elite receiving, and elite versatility. McCaffrey helped the Niners in 2022 to a 12-game winning streak and a trip to the NFC Championship game. In 2023, he went even further, led the NFL in rushing yards, was a top MVP candidate, and helped the Niners reach the Super Bowl, where they lost in overtime to the Chiefs. And he also won Offensive Player of the Year that same year, having over 2,000 scrimmage yards and 21 touchdowns. Now, 2024, he did get hurt, came back, got hurt again. That put him out for the rest of the season. But I think of this trade as a whole, and the 49ers, they slam dunked this one. Meanwhile, the Panthers used most of these picks in 2023 to trade up for Bryce Young, so it's really hard to grade the Panthers here, but based off how Bryce Young is performing, this trade is looking like a C- or a D+ right now for them. Talk about the AJ Brown trade on draft night of 2022, and to this day, this trade still makes me scratch my head so much. Titans were coming off back-to-back playoff appearances. AJ Brown was entering his prime, and he was clearly their best offensive weapon, but after failed contract negotiations and growing tension between Brown and the front office, the Titans made their call. They shipped him to Philadelphia in exchange for the 18th overall pick and a third rounder. And the Eagles immediately gave Brown a 4-year, $100 million extension, banking on him becoming an alpha wide receiver that could elevate Jalen Hurts and take their offense to the next level. And it didn't work. In 2022, he set a franchise record for receiving yards, 1,496 yards and 11 touchdowns, instantly forming one of the best wide receiving duos in the NFL with Devontae Smith. Let's just fast forward to 2025. After all that, AJ Brown and the Eagles finally won a ring, so that alone makes his trade an A+. Anytime a trade can lead you to a ring and the player involved was a reasoning why, it's an easy A+, all day, every day. Meanwhile, for the Titans, they used an 8th overall pick to select big wide receiver Treylon Burks, who was supposed to be the replacement for AJ Brown. Long story short, it hasn't worked out. Treylon Burks has struggled with injuries and inconsistencies, and he simply hasn't been able to stay on the field or develop into anything close to Brown's level. As a matter of fact, the GM who made this trade, John Robinson, ended up getting fired. So another long story short here, the Titans, for me personally, they get a D, and that's being insanely kind. Moving on to another significant trade, the Stephon Diggs trade from the Minnesota Vikings to the Buffalo Bills. You could argue Diggs was a strong reason why Josh Allen became the MVP candidate and now the MVP that he is now. In 2020, Diggs led the NFL in receptions with 127 and receiving yards 1,535. The Bills also went 13-3, and like I said before, Allen took a massive leap. For the 4 straight Pro Bowl seasons, it went over 1,000 yards every year. Unfortunately, after that, things kind of took a massive hit. He became frustrated with his offseason in 2024, and the Buffalo Bills eventually moved on, trading him to the Texans. His time with Buffalo has not come to an end, but make no mistake about it, the Diggs era in Buffalo was a massive success. Now, who did the Vikings use that first round pick on? I don't know, some kid named Justin Jefferson? That's an absolute bust. I mean, imagine being Offensive Player of the Year in 2022, a 2-time first-team All-Pro, a 2-time second-team All-Pro, and a 4-time Pro Bowler, and leading the NFL in receptions and receiving yards in 2022 altogether. I mean, seriously, this was a slam dunk trade for the Minnesota Vikings. The Bills didn't necessarily lose this trade either, but I think the Vikings, they just wanted more. The Vikings, for me personally, they get an A+. I'll give the Bills an A- though. Let's talk about the DeAndre Hopkins trade between the Houston Texans and the Arizona Cardinals. The worst part about this trade is that the Texans couldn't even get a first rounder for DeAndre Hopkins, and they definitely could have gotten a first rounder. Instead, they got back David Johnson, who was an aging running back, a 2nd round pick in 2020, and a 2021 4th round pick. And how did this play out? In 2020, he had over just 1,000 scrimmage yards and 8 total touchdowns. Solid, but nowhere near what they needed to justify his trade. He was a 2nd round pick on Ross Blacklock, who didn't do much either, and he was eventually traded away for late round compensation. Meanwhile, for Arizona, Hopkins wasted no time proving his worth. In 2020, he had over 115 catches for 1,407 yards and 6 touchdowns, instantly becoming Kyler Murray's #1 target. He also had that insane Hail Murray catch where he mossed 3 Bills defenders in the end zone, and that became a highlight moment, an iconic moment at that. Things did slow down in 2022. Injuries started creeping in. He started a 6-game suspension for violating the NFL's PD policy, and his connection with Kyler Murray never returned to form. Let's break this trade down. The Cardinals, they get a B+. They didn't win long term, but they got elite production from Hopkins for a bargain of 2 years. He gave them credibility, a true wide receiver 1, and highlight real moments. Injuries and team dysfunction eventually brought it down. They didn't lose this trade, not even in the slightest. The Texans, this is an F, one of the worst trades in NFL history in my opinion. Poor return, poor asset management, and they got fleeced by a team who took advantage of the dysfunction. This deal was so bad, it became the symbol of everything wrong with the Bill O'Brien GM era for the Texans. To briefly talk about this one. Julio Jones trade between the Atlanta Falcons and the Tennessee Titans in June of 2021. I'm pretty sure most people will agree with that Julio Jones is a legend, one of the best receivers of all time, and personally one of my favorite receivers of all time. But entering 2021 at 32 years old, he was regressing, injuries are piling up, the Falcons are entering a soft rebuild, and Jones made it clear he wanted it out. He even said on Shannon Sharp's show live, "Yeah, I'm out of here." Meanwhile, the Titans were looking for a receiver to pair with AJ Brown, so they traded a 2022 2nd round pick and a 2023 4th round pick to the Atlanta Falcons in exchange for Julio Jones and a 6th round pick. Julio would play just 10 games after being plagued by injuries and inconsistencies, and he only had 1 touchdown, 434 yards, and 31 catches. And that was his one and only season with the Tennessee Titans after that. line. Falcons, they did better, but not by a big margin. They used that 2022 second round pick on Troy Anderson, who's a raw athletic player with upside, but not a true difference maker. The big part about this trade for them, I guess, was that they got rid of Julio's contract. Titans get a D. They gave up draft capital for one forgettable year of production. Julio didn't move the needle, and the team flamed out early in the playoffs. The intent made sense, but the return wasn't there. Meanwhile, turned these picks into superstars, but they got value for an aging player before his decline fully hit. They made a tough call, and they ended up being right about the timeline. Nobody really won this trade. The Falcons only get the benefit of the doubt because they made the right move trading Julio Jones. We're now going into the Aaron Rodgers trade between the New York Jets and the Green Bay Packers. Jets in April of 2023, they had a nasty team, a nasty defense, and they added offensive weapons like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. They just needed a quarterback. Enter Aaron Rodgers, four-time MVP, future Hall of Famer, still running the mystique of his time with the Green Bay Packers. They were so confident they were going to get him. They got guys like Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, and Nathaniel Hackett. They weren't just trading for a player, they were just giving these guys the keys to the system. So here's how the trade went. The Packers sent the number 15 pick, a 5th rounder, in exchange to the Jets for a 13th overall pick, a 2023 second rounder, a 6th rounder, and a 2024 conditional second round pick. That pick could become a first round pick if Rodgers plays 65% of his snaps. Then it happened. 4 plays in, Rodgers tore his Achilles on the first drive of the season. All the Super Bowl dreams, the hard knock hype, and the new era gone before it even started. It's the entire season in 2023, and it just fell apart with Zach Wilson and a carousel of backups. But there was still hope. Rodgers promised he'd return, and the Jets ran it back in 2024. And yeah, he did return, but it wasn't the version they paid for. He played a full season in 2024, but he looked average, just over 3,000 yards passing, 28 touchdowns, and 11 receptions. Not terrible numbers, but not close to what they needed. The deep ball wasn't there, the mobility was gone, the magic, it all faded, and the Jets also went 5-12. Jets also used those picks on Will McDonald, who's been a decent pass rusher, and the other 2 late round picks like Jared Bernard-Converse and Zach Kuntz have been dead pieces at best. The nail in the coffin was when the Jets finally released them in 2025. For the Packers, I'm not even going to talk about their draft picks. They did get Edgerrin Cooper, who's been a solid linebacker. Luke Van Ness and Luke Musgrave haven't exactly done much, but it's about Jordan Love, who they gave the keys to the kingdom to in 2023 after they traded Aaron Rodgers. He has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL since being given the keys to the system. Just for me personally, they get a D. They paid for a dream that turned into a 4-snap nightmare, followed by average season and a release. McDonald is solid, but the picks didn't move a needle. No playoff wins, no QB stability, no real identity coming out of this. They swung big and whiffed it. Packers, they get a B+ for me. Their draft picks haven't hit yet, but they moved off a declining quarterback at the right time. They gave Love the keys, and they walked into a promising new era. This wasn't about the picks, it was about a transition, and the Green Bay Packers executed it perfectly. Let's briefly talk about the 49ers and the Dolphins. In 2021, their NFL draft trade that caused one of the biggest butterfly effects in NFL history. 49ers owned the number 12 overall pick in that 2021 NFL draft. Jimmy Garoppolo was technically still their starting quarterback, but the writing was on the wall. Injuries, limitations, and playoff disappointment had the 49ers front office eyeing a true franchise quarterback, so they made their move, a massive one. Niners sent their number 12 overall pick in 2021, a 2022 first round pick, a 2023 first round pick, and a 2022 third round pick. Then at number 3 overall, the 49ers took Trey Lance. And Lance did have the tools, big arm, big mobility, and upside, but he was raw, coming from a limited college sample at North Dakota State. The plan was to let him sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo and let him develop, and eventually took over. And this plan never happened. After a few games in 2021, he was named starter in 2022, then broke his ankle in week 2 and never regained a starting job. Jimmy G took over, he got hurt, and then Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy, in the 2022 NFL draft took over, showed up, balled out, and never looked back. By 2023, Lance was quarterback 3, and eventually traded to the Dallas Cowboys for a 2024 4th round pick. and that's it. It's over right there. 49ers traded away 3 firsts and a third to move for a quarterback who started just 4 games, threw 5 touchdowns, and traded for a day 3 pick. 49ers still survived it because of Brock Purdy, who led them to the NFC champion in 2022 and then the Super Bowl in 2023, where they narrowly lost to the Chiefs in overtime. What did the Dolphins do with those picks? In 2021, they flipped that number 2 overall pick and traded up to 6th overall to take Jalen Waddle, who was already one of the better young receivers in the NFL. One of the other first round picks to take Tyreek Hill, and then another, it went towards Bradley Chubb. So what's the verdict here? The 49ers, I'm not even going to give them a F or a D here. I'm going to give them a C+ because it led them to their franchise quarterback with the last pick in the NFL draft. So while they did totally bust on the pick with Trey Lance, when it comes to Brock Purdy, that's the only reason why they survived this trade, and that's the only reason why they don't get an F here. For the Dolphins, that trade got them Tyreek Hill and also Jalen Waddle, and they formed one of the best wide receiving duos in the NFL. Bradley Chubb didn't amount to much. He hasn't been a great pass rusher since he's been with the Dolphins, but since they got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, that's easy to off-balance it. This gets an A+. Finally, we end this off with a trade that defined 2 franchises, the Matthew Stafford trade between the Detroit Lions and the Los Angeles Rams. After hiring Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, the Lions were ready to tear it all down. Matthew Stafford, the longtime face of this franchise, had given him everything: grit, heart, leadership, but unfortunately he had 0 playoff wins to show for it. He needed a fresh start. The Rams, on the other hand, were all in. They had just come off a disappointing playoff loss with Jared Goff, and they were done pretending he could take them any further. Sean McVay had seen enough. They didn't want to upgrade. They needed one to chase the Super Bowl while the window was still open. So the Rams ended up getting Matthew Stafford. The Lions ended up getting 2 first-round picks in 2022 and 2023 and a 2021 third-round pick. Let's start with the Rams. They won a ring. Simple as that in 2022. It doesn't matter what happened after that with Matthew Stafford. They won a ring. And so the trade paid off. If the trade pays off and you win a ring, that's all that matters to me. Easy A+ for the Rams. However, the Lions, they ended up flipping the script on everybody. Everybody thought Goff was going to be a bridge quarterback and he was going to be gone soon. However, between 2022 and 2023, he threw for over 9,000 yards and 59 touchdowns. He developed strong chemistry with Amon-Ra St. Brown, got playmakers like Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta. The Lions went from being the laughingstock of the NFL to a real contender. I already pointed out Jahmyr Gibbs, who is one of the best running backs in the league right now. They also took Jameson Williams via trade-up, and he's still developing, but he's already a big play threat in my opinion. Both these teams for me get an A. The Rams gambled on Matthew Stafford. They got the Super Bowl ring they wanted it and validated the move. It doesn't matter what happens after this. The Rams still won this trade in a pretty big way. Easy A for me. Meanwhile, the Lions got those picks. They got their offensive identity and they turned Jared Goff into a legit leader. No ring yet, but they built something more durable, more than a 1-year run, and they still might win big if they can win a ring too. So I'm going to give them an A too. Not an A+, but I'm still giving them an A. And that is officially it for this video. The biggest trade since 2020. The wins and losses that came with them. Some teams took huge swings and hit gold. Others gave it the farm and got absolutely nothing for them. If there's one thing these trade proves, is that no move is safe. One deal can win with Super Bowl, or the others can set your franchise back. That's the end of this video. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn the bell icon for future football content. Follow me on social medias down below in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.